Hvala Miro, sve vas lijepo pozdravljam, ministre, naše prijatelje iz Sjedinjenih Američkih Država, sve vas ovdje nazočne na Dubrovnik forumu koji je doživio nekoliko različitih verzija i imena, od Hrvatske samita, Hrvatske foruma pa do Dubrovnik foruma. It is my great pleasure to be here in my capacity as the Vice Chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the European Parliament and to outline few aspects regarding the topic that we are discussing today, and that is the geopolitical challenges. After the Cold War and after the fall of the Iron Curtain, we in Europe have, if we put aside the greater Serbian aggression by Milosevic towards the countries of the former Yugoslavia, including my own country, we have enjoyed a stable environment in Europe. We were building the European project and we were creating a stronger transatlantic partnership. However, whatever we thought several years ago when the European Union adopted its security strategy, things have evolved. The context has evolved and the new threats have emerged, both externally and internally, when I look at it from the perspective of the European Union. In the meantime, one of our biggest member states, the key partner in the transatlantic relationship, the key defense contributor to the EU activities, the United Kingdom, has actually voted to walk out of the European project. I have said in the course of the last 2-3 years that it was the most unnecessary and the most badly devised referendum, which opened a possibility for those who were advocating anything but the European Union project, and that's something that I have witnessed over the years in the European Parliament, a platform to manipulate and to convince the majority of those who voted in this referendum to say, thank you very much, a little bit over 40 years was enough. This was a step that in a way copied the similarly panicked reaction of Tony Blair in 2003 and 2004, but luckily other negative referenda prevents it at the time. I'm truly convinced already first negative referendum on the constitutional treaty, but this one was worse because it was to stay or not to stay in the European Union. So though that we all in the European Union regret that, we are in the position to respect the majority of the British vote and try to see how to implement the Article 50 of the Treaty on the European Union. At the same time, the United States is focused on its final months of the presidential elections, which have also signaled an interesting trend, and that is a little bit different than the crisis of the mainstream in the European Union, which we are witnessing everywhere, especially in the EU elections, but later on in many national elections. When you look at the three candidates that came up and the closest run-up to the White House office, we can see that these are people in a way a little bit out of the mainstream of the main Republican and the Democratic politicians that in Europe are used to. But nonetheless, I truly believe that we will continue strengthening our transatlantic partnership with the new President of the United States immediately as of January next year. Because both the European Union and the United States work together, we share the same values, we trade together. If need be, we even enter the military operations and fight together. But also we need to put our relationship as the major axe of the global governance in the focus of all of us, because I think this is something that is essentially needed for the overall global stability. In that respect, I look forward for the completion of the TTIP, despite some criticism of transparency, of possible negative effects. I think that the process that we are engaged in is truly addressed towards creating more jobs on both sides of the Atlantic, better protection of consumers, and more growth both to the United States and the European Union member states. On an economic point of view, the 2016 will be the 4th year of the recovery of the European economy, and the expected growth rate will be around 1.9%. However, these signs of progress are not enough, since 22 million Europeans are still out of work, and 4.5 million of those 22 are below the age of 25. Unfortunately, my country, Croatia, is at the bronze medal in that race after Spain and Greece, and there is much to be done in terms of increasing the youth employment. Few points on the aspects which are clear for us, and these are the new challenges. The threats of terrorism, especially the so-called Islamic State, have turned the manifestation of terrorist acts into something completely new. What we are witnessing now in Europe are attacks within our own territory from our own citizens that have been radicalized, that have been manipulated, and that are performing terrorist acts, which are very, very difficult to prevent, thus creating the feeling of insecurity and threat to our citizens. Also, what the European Union is doing, and it's something that we should put a further accent on, is the implementation of several strategies on the internal security agenda, on the counter-terrorism strategy, on the European agenda for security. If these strategies were implemented fully, then the better cooperation of all our services at the level of the 28 could be in a better position to prevent the violent extremism, radicalization, and actual terrorist attacks. We are all and were involved in the migration and refugees flow of an unprecedented nature over the last 2 years. Croatia was on the Mediterranean Balkan route. Here I fully subscribe to the policy of the European Union that the key aspect is the protection of the external borders, better functioning of the Schengen, upgrading the Dublin Convention, and trying to exchange information and cooperate in a way that we do not create physical impediments between the European Union and the states, but that the overall policy addresses the issue at its source and at its first entry point of the European Union. That requires solidarity, that requires joint action, but also partnership with countries such as Turkey, the minister, and I think that the package that was agreed in the course of the last year, including both financial aid that the European Union is to provide for use as we are having over 2 million of refugees. We are not the only one in the region. Jordan and Lebanon are in a rather similar position, but also looking at the facts how we can better improve the process of the accession negotiations, and I think that the steps that have been done there are very solid and are requiring the two sides to work together. A little bit on the European Union's neighborhood. Besides my duty of the Vice Chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, I am responsible for dealing with Ukraine in the European Parliament. And dealing with that important European country, one of the biggest European countries, is a clear manifestation of new Russia's policy, which in many aspects is trying to either keep the frozen conflicts as potential active conflicts, or actually act in a way that is contrary to the international law and destabilize several countries in its neighborhood, but also part of our Eastern Partnership policy. The situation is more than clear in Ukraine, with the illegal annexation of Crimea, with the help of Russia towards the separatists in both Donetsk and Lugansk regions, but it is rather similar in Georgia, South Ossetia, Abkhazia, in Moldova, Transnistria, with a new conflict that has re-emerged in Armenia and Azerbaijan, while Belarus is far from any acceptable European standards of democracy, human rights, or the values that we share. Thus, the entire Eastern Partnership policy is in a way blocked with a wider relationship that we have with Russia. I have mentioned Eastern Partnership, but the Southern Partnership, that is the Mediterranean cooperation, which is important here in Dubrovnik, because many times we have addressed here at this summit how we can increase various fora that have been put in place for the better cooperation in the Mediterranean, but the situation in Northern Africa and Middle East does not seem to enable us to put in function a very carefully devised and a noble project of the Union for the Mediterranean, elements at the table at the moment that we can foster cooperation as we would have liked. So if we can really say that after the Arab Spring and the destabilization in the eastern borders, we rather have, instead of stability in our neighborhood, we have indeed a ring of fire that doesn't seem to be put out. What I would like to say is a final note on the enlargement process. And here the position of myself, Minister for Foreign Affairs, our party, unlike some other party leaders in Croatia who recklessly say things on our neighbors, I can clearly say that enlargement is a priority for Croatia, that Bosnia and Herzegovina and its European future and the equal rights of all the three constituent peoples is a priority number one for my country in terms of our foreign policy engagement, and that will be the direct direction that we will hold and the course that we will stay. From that point of view, we as the freshest member of the European Union voluntarily and without hesitation share our experience and our knowledge in the enlargement process. But at the same time, we will require of all of our neighbors to respect the standards, to respect the criteria, to fulfill the acquis based on the individual merits, and at the same time address several residual issues which are still unacceptable between some of the countries in here, especially Serbia, with some of the laws which are disguised under the concept of universal jurisdiction but are actually an unprecedented hybrid regional jurisdiction, thus extending the powers of Serbian prosecutors, Serbian courts to the Croatian citizens for crimes committed on our territory against our citizens. This is a standard that would not have accepted any of the member states sitting around this table or anywhere else, and we as the member of the European Union will find ways to address this issue, solve it, and thus increase the security of our citizens. But despite that, we want to support the European path of all of our countries here in Southeast Europe, because we believe that a too slow process will actually have diverse effects. The perspective needs to be nurtured, needs to be followed up by new institutional steps, and we will try to avoid any stalling of these processes, because without a clear perspective that actually goes in the right direction, it is difficult to keep up the momentum. I thank you very much for this opportunity, and I look forward for your interventions and our debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrej, for your substantial contribution.